Afternoon all. Hope you're having a great day. I am on day 2 of canning chicken broth. Now you can do this all in one day if you have like a ton of time, but because you got, like I said in the last video, excuse me, you have to let your carcasses and vegetables and whatnot that you're putting in your chicken broth simmer for about 8 hours. You can go 6 hours, but the longer you let it simmer, the richer it's going to be. So yesterday ours simmered actually for almost 10 hours. And while I was at work, Chris had taken it off the stove, strained all the bones and stuff out of it, vegetables, and now we're on to, and then put it in the fridge, where this morning I skimmed the top. There was a light layer of fat. You don't want the fat. Not exactly sure why, other than a couple people on YouTube, plus the National Food Preservation Society and the Ball Canning book all say skim it off. So now I'm going to put this stuff in jars. So let's talk about all this for a second. If you decide you want to start canning, there are a handful of canners out there that are on YouTube. I can recommend a couple if you message me, and I'll tell you who they are. They're the ones I follow. But if you decide to just start researching it on your own, which I recommend, make sure in the video at some point, usually in the beginning, they say that they follow the Ball book. There's also an Amish canning book, and they usually check out the USDA or the National Food Preservation website. If you're new to canning, you want to make sure you use those as guidelines. We're not even, in our house, even fairly new to canning, but we still follow those guidelines. They tell you how to do everything. The Ball canning book, we have one. Matter of fact, if you hold on one second, I'll see if I can't find it real quick. I'll be right back. I'm going to find this. Okay, I'm back. I know for you it was like a whole millisecond, but it was actually a couple minutes. So anyhow, right here it is. Blue Book, Ball, Preservation Home Canning. There's several editions. This is one of the newer ones. And there's over 500 recipes in this bad boy. They teach you how to do all kinds of stuff. These are tried and true recipes that won't kill you. Botulism is a real thing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can get it. It's odorless. It's tasteless. You won't know you have it until you're sick or dead. So, that being said, follow some rules if you're new to canning. So, when you start researching things, look it up. Because you'll have some people that say, they'll tell you off the bat, this is not a approved recipe, and they swing it a little. There's some basic rules, like you don't want to, if you're canning something, you don't want to put noodles in it, rice in it, flour. There's some things you can put pectin in, but they make a specific pectin in gel for canning. Some things require citric acid of some sorts, like when you're pickling, things like that. And they make a citric acid, right there, citric acid, for canning certain things. This is canning for tomatoes. You want to use a canning salt versus other salts if it requires it, because it's a purer salt. It hasn't been iodized, hasn't been changed anyway. It's just salt, which is important. And I think that's it as far as that goes. Follow recipes, especially in the beginning. Dried herbs, you can get away with changing things, adding to on that with dry herbs, because they don't. Your goal is to watch your acidic level. Some products are very acidic, some aren't, and that's where you can get in trouble with botulism. That's why you have essentially 3 different kinds of canning. With the one, steam canning, we don't do. We do the other 2, which is water bath canning and pressure canning. Today we're pressure canning. I've got my pressure canner out. It's warming up. It's ready to go. Um, and the reason why they call it pressure canning is you put this lid on it, and as you can see, it's got a gauge right here. Well, actually, I don't know if you can see that because the sunlight's hitting it. There you go. And you follow by that, and then you've got this little piece here. Gets a weight put on it, which helps control the pressure. And then it's got a couple nifty safety accessories. This here, if you aren't paying attention and you happen to be about to blow it up, this will blow out, releasing the pressure. And then this little gadget here, when there's enough pressure in the canner before you even get to the point where you're at your proper pressure, this locks the lid on. That way it doesn't, it's an added, if you do blow it, not only does that pop, but this holds the lid down so you don't literally put a hole in your ceiling. It is really safe. You just have to really pay attention to what you're doing. And by really paying attention to what you're doing, I mean, don't leave your kitchen. Don't go to the store. If you have to go to the bathroom or whatever, great. Chase your kids around. We do that all the time. But you want to be within an earshot. You want to be paying attention to what you're doing. Pressure can change, and it can change fast. It's happened to me several times. I'd be at 11 psi 1 second, which is the recommended canning pressure for elevation at 1,000 feet or less. I happen to be at 987 feet, being here in Licking County in the fine state of Ohio. So I know I need to be at 11 psi at all times. Every canning system, pressure canner, is a little different. This is a Presto. There's a company called American that makes one that's a little fancier. Doesn't do anything different, but it looks a little fancier, and it costs about $400 more than the Presto canner. The Presto is tried and true. This is our second one. The first one we had it for like 40 years. Well, we didn't have, but Chris's mom had it, and then we inherited it. And we still use it. I use that for water bath canning. Water bath canning is nothing more than it's something you use for fruits, jams, jellies, salsas, things that are high acidic level. If the recipe is a high acidic level, you can water bath it, which means you just run it at you put them in there. The water is above which I'll show you when I got some apples I need to do. You make sure the water is above the cans you set in the pot, and you let it boil for a determined amount of time. And once again, that would be in the recipe for it. Usually around 5 to 10 minutes. Some things a little longer. Like in this case, we're pressure canning. I'm doing chicken broth, and I know I have to pressure can that at 11 psi for 90 minutes. So I have to kind of hang out in my kitchen for 90 minutes, which means you're going to see a lot of me today because, well, maybe not today, but I'm going to be shooting a couple, 2, 3 videos while sitting here in the kitchen. All right, so anyhow, I'm going to get started. So here's what I did. Chicken broth right here in this pot. And I brought it back up to a simmer. And then a simmer, by the way, is when it starts boiling around the edges. That way I know it's good and hot, right around 180 degrees. My pot for my pressure canner has an inch of water. It's got about a gallon of water in it, maybe about 2 inches of water. There's a line inside here that tells you how much to fill it up with. And there's a rack in there. You never want to set your jars straight on the bottom of the pan. You'll shatter them, guaranteed, the minute you start pressure canning them. So I've got 2 inches of water in there. I've got it warming up to about 180 degrees. And now, let's talk about jars for a second. I've got my jars in water. I'm reusing my jars, so they're not brand new. You'll see some guys that will sanitize. Some people will sanitize their jars, keep them in a dishwasher or in a pot of boiling water, or at least high temp water, to sanitize them, which is great. Now, Ball says, and so does the National Food Preservation Society, says that if you're going to pressure can and you have new jars and you're pressure canning more than 10 minutes, which almost everything takes more than 10 minutes, you don't necessarily need to sanitize because the temperature it gets up to kills everything. So I just wash mine, even when they're brand new. I just wash them real good, and then I set them in a tub of hot water. You want everything up to temperature, and it took me a minute to figure out why we had to do that, because it says that no matter what you're canning, unless you're cold packing, which is a whole different beast in itself. So that being said, I think the reason being is you want to start at a certain temperature. Like these take 90 minutes. Well, if I don't start at a certain temperature, if these aren't right around 120 degrees on those, that's not 180 degrees on the broth, which will make them 180 degrees when I put them in the jars. And you want your jars warm so they don't shatter when you put hot stuff into a cold jar. It could shatter. I've never seen it happen, but it could. It's one of those, it could happen. So, jars are warm. That's warm. That way, when I pressure can it for 90 minutes, it's guaranteed to get up to the temperature that it needs to get up to, which I want to say is like 240 degrees. Don't quote me on that because I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's 240 degrees. So that's why. You want to wash your lids and your rings. Wash them. You don't have to. There was a time that you had to boil them to activate the glue that's on the edges of the rims. With the ball jar lids, you don't have to do that anymore. They just have to be washed. They changed the type of glue they use, and now you don't have to heat them up to activate it. Now we do use some other jars that we buy from a small store right outside of Zanesville, Ohio, that are just standard golden lids, we buy lids as replacement lids, especially with the pandemic. You just couldn't find ball jar lids, and they're very good, but I don't know if those are like that, so I do heat those up to activate the glue and keep them in really hot water. It's a little extra step, but it's okay. All right, so all we got to do to can this up, like I said, this is how I can, which is pretty much the way it says to do it in the Preservation Society. I've got my stock pot here full of chicken stock, and I had the lid on it to keep it going. I brought it up to a rolling boil. I've got my jars right here in the sink. You can't see them, but right here they are. And I only pull out a couple at a time. And according to the directions for canning chicken stock, you want 1 inch of head space. Now, on most of these jars, these are wide mouth ball jars, but pretty much any ball jar, it's this bottom lip right here is 1 inch. Ball makes a measurer that you can use. I personally don't use it. I kind of got a general idea of where it's going to be. If you overfill it, things that can happen is you could run into a blowout during pressure canning. I also have a funnel made by Ball. You can buy aftermarket ones. It helps keep the slop down. Can't hold the jar at the moment. It's really hot because I just started pouring liquid in it. But you want 1 inch of head space. Like I said, every set of instructions on how to make something, recipe I guess you'd say, will tell you how much head space you need. I've found rule of thumb is most preserves, jams, jellies, the pecan praline that I made, they allow you about a 1/4 inch of head space. It'll also tell you what kind of jars you can use. Like with these jars, or with chicken broth, I can do these in either pints or quarts. I do them in quarts. We feed a lot of people. I mean, on any given night, we have a minimum of 3, usually 4, because that's how many people live in our house. But some nights it could be 6 or 8. I mean, if we have everybody over in our family, I mean, and I'm talking just like me and Chris's family with the kids, you're looking at least 6. You bring a grandkid over, that's 7. In-laws, things like that. So we don't always cook small. These are good. But anyhow, to get back to the point, I can do these in quarts or pints, which are smaller jars, pints are, and run that way. But I can't do them all in the pressure canner because they have different times. Like these have to pressure can for 90 minutes. If I did pint jars, it'd be 75 minutes. Things that you need to pressure can, for the most part, are low acidic things. Most meats, broths, soups and stews are commonplace on that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these finished up. What I'm going to do is I will put the rings on them. Well, here, I'll show you real quick, so you know. It's not difficult by any means. A ring and a lid, or a ring and a lid. You simply place the lid on the jar, put the ring on top of it, and tighten it. Now, as far as tightening goes, finger tight. I know finger tight is kind of a lucrative word. One thing I did forget, before you put your ring on, in a little bowl, I have a little bit of vinegar and just white vinegar and a paper towel. You want to make sure you wipe that rim off. And not so much with broths, but it's a good habit to get into, and it's a recommended practice. But if you have something that's got food in, actual like meats or whatever in it, potatoes, you may have a little bit on there, and then it won't seal right. And the minute you start pressurizing, it will start bleeding out and siphoning. Yes, thank you. And you can run into problems. So wipe it off, vinegar, paper towel, lid on, finger tight. Finger tight is kind of there's no set thing for it. Once it is on there finger tight, which I have found finger tight is, you can't twist it anymore with just using, at least in my case, my fingers. Once it stops, I stop. You don't want to crank on it, is the thing, because then you can blow it up. Just the jar, not the whole system, but the jar. You can break the jar. It gets to be a mess. Then you got a lot of chicken broth or whatever it is you're cooking in there. So once you got it done, into the pot. I know this will hold 7. I'm shooting to do 7, and I think I'm going to make it, but that's how you do it. So I won't hold you up. After this, I'm going to put the lid on it, bring it up to pressure, which you'll probably see in the next video, only because I have a completely different topic I want to talk about that doesn't have anything to do with pressure cooking. It's going to be political, so if you want to skip it, I get it, but I want to talk about the fiscal budget for the federal government and the COVID relief package, some of my thoughts on it, and to let people know where some of the money's going. I'm not going to have a true opinion either way on a lot of it, but I think people should know what's going on. All right? I love you guys. Stay safe. See you in the next video. Wear your mask and tell somebody you love them.